Welcome everyone. Welcome to an interesting session on 5G. As you will notice, we have a very international panel, possibly all international panel in our webinar cCep, what we have been doing for many days now. So today what we will do is we will go through what is 5G, why it is important, where are the applications, what are the issues, and see where how the regulations are evolving. If you really, see 5G and why we are talking about 5G today, 5G is said to be at inflection point for telecom industry. It is touted to have more profound impact on people compared to what happened when we crossed from 3G to 4G. Also, it is considered to be something which every country is interested in winning that particular war. That was not the case in early days, right? So why everybody is so keen about 5G? What is it in that, right? 5G, as we all know, is the next generation, fifth generation of communication standards, which will increase speed, from 4G. It is said that speed can increase up to 20 times or 100 times, depending on what 4G standard you take. The speed will go up to 20 gigabits per second. So that is what you are looking at in 5G situation. Low latency, and most important, billions of connections. This is important, especially when you are looking at IoT and smart city applications, because when you're looking at multiple sensors coming into play, and each sensor requiring their own IP address, it is important that you have ability to have so many sensors being able to connect without slowing the network down. And that's where 5G comes in. 5G is considered to be a foundation for a lot of interesting new applications which we're talking about, whether it is AI, whether it is IoT, whether it is AR, VR, all those applications which we are dreaming of, or where we see that kind of wow effect, may not really be successful without 5G in place. If you really look at a kind of an analogy, e-commerce came in early 2000, late 90s, early 2000. It did not become successful because the speed or the user experience was not good enough. It became successful now because the speed and the user experience improved drastically, which made e-commerce much more viable, much more mainstream. Similar situation is considered for AR, VR, AI, and many of those applications, IoT, especially IoT and AR, VR, where high speed and low latency becomes very critical for purpose of delivering good user experience. So 5G is considered to be very important. It has good points, huge benefits. It has bad points, and it has some of the worst points. Today we will see what are those points, those issues. In fact, it is said that Wi-Fi will become redundant. It will be thing of past once 5G comes in. There are some people who say it may not happen, but 5G is considered to be so at the speed at which it will work and the way the technology works, you may not even need a Wi-Fi at home or in office. How does it work? Primarily, when you talk about 5G, what you're really talking about is using higher frequency range to deliver signals. Generally, 4G goes around at multiple levels, but around 700-800 megahertz to 1800 megahertz to 2.5 or megahertz and so gigahertz and so on. In 5G, I think there are multiple levels of frequency ranges which will be used. It starts with something which is used in same as 4G, which is around 700-800 megahertz. Then there will be at 6 gigahertz range. That's a medium level 5G frequency band. and then the real 5G, what is touted, which will bring all these benefits, will be at 24 to 300 gigahertz range. Now, obviously, different ranges brings different implication and values. We look into the implications of those. 5G is also very interesting from what do I call national interest perspective, national security perspective. And if you really look at US has passed a law on securing 5G. It says 5G and beyond, 5G secure 5G and beyond act. They want to make sure that there is a control over that particular technology, because there is a view that is very important from national security perspective. Also, if you look at different technologies coming in, there are companies like Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, Qualcomm, Samsung, who are leading players in this particular technology. And a lot of those companies are actually focusing on what they call traditional model, where hardware and software are provided by the same entity. Once you buy their hardware and software, you are locked with them, because it's very difficult to change it. It's very costly to change it. And then there are other companies like Rakuten and others who are focusing on a fully virtualized mobile network system, which is more like your cloud computing, where your hardware becomes you can mix and match the hardware, but the software is something which controls uh, the whole performance. Now this is the another war which is happening on who is going to win between the traditional model versus fully virtualized mobile network model. So that's the other area of development which we are seeing, which is interesting. Also, there is a lot of fight which is happening in patent world. Again, Huawei is winning in terms of they have filed more than 3,000 plus patents, followed by Samsung, and followed by then other people follow. So that's something which is interesting aspect to see of how these patents will lead to development of technology. We will see some of these issues which I talked about during our discussion. And with this introduction, I would rather go to Mihir. Mihir, you've done a lot of work on 5G technologies, and I know you are a Clint Eastwood fan. So can you tell the good, the bad, and the ugly about 5G?
Certainly, Vaibhav. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to join. I know, we are going through this terrible time of pandemic, but any bright ray of future, anything that promises great future is welcome. Coming back to this good, bad, and ugly. Of course, Vaibhav, you know me. It's one of my most favorite movies, and it's a perfect metaphor in this situation, because if you consider that what we have currently is a wild waste in the telecom sector on the 5G frontier. There are heroes, there are villains, there are unknown rogues, all going on at the same time. So let's look at some of these heroes and good, bad, and ugly. So if we start with the good, Clint Eastwood, of course. The good part in 5G is, of course, the data speed. It gives you a very, very high bandwidth, as you discussed, Vaibhav, at the low range of low bandwidth, which is where the 4G operates. Even at that level, it increases the bandwidth for 4G to up to 250 megabits per second. Now, the band in which Wi-Fi operates, which is around, below 6 gigahertz bandwidth. In that bandwidth, also 5G has a potential to increase the bandwidth to 6 gigabits per second. And then the real value is going to come, as you said, in millimeter band, which is 24 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz And in that range, the data speed can go as high as 20 megabits per second. Another great aspect of 5G is latency. If you look at average latency in 4G, it's about 50 milliseconds. Of course, we don't feel that bad, but it's 50 milliseconds. 5G has potential, especially in the ultra low latency standards that they are going to use to bring it down to 1 millisecond, which will enable a lot of new kind of applications and a lot of new kinds of possibilities. Another is 4G connects about 1,000 units or in thousands of units in 1 square mile. 5G is going to connect millions of units in 1 square mile. So there you're looking at the factor of almost 100 times of connections. Another great aspect of 5G is going to be the convergence of cellular network and Wi-Fi network. They both are going to be converged into one network called 5G, which means we don't have to have a separate devices. We don't have to log into different places depending on where we are. Our devices will be continuously connected to 5G network, whoever is your provider, whether you are in home or you are outside at office, anywhere you are. Also 5G, because of high bandwidth, low latency, a lot of connection, it is going to enable a lot of new kind of applications, what we call Industrial Revolution 4 applications like IoT, AR, VR, autonomous car, telemedicine, a lot of those. So that's the good side of it. Now let's look at the bad side of it, right? The baddies. The biggest bad part in 5G is going to be capital investment or the capital expenditure. 5G will require different frequency. So those frequency auctions, governments are going to try to collect a lot of money. It's believed that frequency auctions for every company is going to go into billions of dollars. So the immediate impact is purchasing the license, and which will be worth billions of dollars. And then you have to set up infrastructure because 5G is a different technology than 4G. It talks about, you have different kind of cell sizes, small cell sizes. And the small cells require a lot more cells in the same coverage area. So companies, telecom operators will have to spend a lot of money on setting up that infrastructure and connecting those cells with the backhaul capacity, fibers, to their network access points. Another cost is going to be operating expense. When you have much bigger, wider network, when you have so many cells in the network, you have to maintain them, you have to upgrade them, you have to replace them. So that is going to significantly increase the operational expenses for telcos. Another issue, I would say, is going to be new devices, because our current devices obviously will work with 4G or the Wi-Fi, but to really get the potential of 5G, they will have to be upgraded. So our laptops, our mobile phones, all of those will have to be upgraded. And that upgrade is going to take its own time, life cycle, because of the lock-in effect and all of those. Another barriers I could call is shorter reach. Cell in 5G use high frequency, so they reach to the shorter distance. So their coverage is much limited compared to 4G, which means it is going to increase what we call digital divide issue. Rural areas or where the population is very dispersed, it will not make economic sense or at least difficult to install 5G equipments for few people. So that is also going to create some issues regarding reach. Now we come to the TUCO, right? The berries, the ROGs in the 5G session. The main aspect in 5G, the ugly part of 5G, is going to be the security. Vaibhav, you talked about national security issues, right? We'll talk a little bit more about it. And also network security issues, which also I think we'll touch upon later on. So what happens is that when you are running mission critical governmental and commercial applications like aircraft navigation, nuclear power plant operations, power grid management, intelligent transport system, all the autonomous car connected with each other and with the infrastructure of the highways, telemedicine, automated factories, all of those very mission critical applications are going to be running on 5G. Now, if you have the issue with security, you have these applications will be compromised. So that's one big bad part of it. Another part is privacy, which is in some way related to security. But here I want to just talk about that 5G will be using many different kind of devices. So you have telephones, you have laptops, you have cameras, you have sensors of all different kinds. And they will be collecting a lot of different type of information about you. You know, how frequently you sleep, when you wake up, what you do, where you go, all kinds of information will be collected through different sources. But then you can have AI model built behind that, which can triangulate all that information, which can create huge privacy issue. So privacy may not be directly really related to security, even in this case. It will ask you to sign off on some privacy policy, which we all do. And then you have the systems in the back end, AI systems, which will triangulate and create a lot of privacy issues. Another aspect is going to be interference. 5G is operating at a level where you have satellite operations going on, especially the weather satellites and all of those. So those interferences is going to be really bad because it will slow down other critical applications which are operating in the same frequency band. Another aspect is going to be the absorption. You don't know because 5G operates in a frequency which is easily absorbed by water vapor or water molecule, which means 5G will be significantly affected by rain and high humidity and snow, even foliage, even the humidity around trees will be affecting 5G network. Then also it will be affected by geographic locations, the way building is structured, the way building materials are used, what type of material you have used. All of those are going to create a lot of differences in absorption. And that is also going to be a bad part of 5G in a way of implementing 5G. And the last point I want to touch on is the health risk. People are always worried about radiation from electromagnetic waves. They are worried because, we can't see them and they are affecting our body at the cellular level. With 5G, cells are much closer to the ground level because they are small cells compared to the tall towers, which means the cells emanating the radiation are much closer to you. At the same time, there are going to be many, many more cells in order for 5G to have a great coverage. So obviously people are worried. However, experts say that 5G is operating in what they call non-ionizing zone. You have a non-ionizing zone, which typically has less effect on the body, like visible light, right? Visible light is a non-ionizing zone, and it is actually higher frequency than frequency at which 5G is going to operate. So that is non-ionizing zone does not have as much effect as ionizing zone, which is where the X-rays and gamma rays and ultraviolet rays will come into picture. So experts say in non-ionizing zone, the threat is relatively low. There have been many studies done on 4G, and most studies have found very little effect on health of human being or animals. And there are some control studies done on 5G sector. At the same time, International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Prevention has issued guidelines, which most countries are following. And IEEE, we are so happy to have Farid here with us from IEEE. They have also issued guidelines on health issues. So at this point of time, health is certainly a question mark. and there will be more studies done and will be in the future. So back to you, Vaibhav. I've taken a long time, but I think there are so many good aspects.
I know. And thank you, Mihir. I just see the bad and the ugly giving a lot of headaches to telecom companies, especially in India. When they find it difficult to get permission to put their tower on a building for a 4G. Now, with the increased number of towers required and with the higher frequency, which may have little more health risk compared to maybe 4G, even though it's in non-ionizing zone, I just see the headache multiplied for our Indian telecom company when they start.
In some places, Vaibhav, people have even burned down the towers, assuming there is a high risk.
Yeah, so it's going to be a tough. It's going to be interesting to see how they actually approach this. But anyway, let's move on to Siddhartha. Siddhartha, can you spend less than 5 minutes on new applications of 5G?
Okay, thanks. So, as we all know, 5G is expected to enable some really novel applications. The International Telecommunications Union has, in fact, identified three key usages of 5G wireless technology. One is enhanced mobile broadband, because the new standards will enhance the bandwidth capacity that we currently have and will provide more user mobility. So the downlink speed can go up to 20 gigabits per second. Then there's ultra reliable low latency applications, which is required for critical applications that require a lot of reliability when you want connectivity. So there's robust uninterrupted data connections, that can be used for aircraft navigation systems, can be used for nuclear reactor safety systems, can be used for power grid operations or telemedicine. And then finally, there is massive machine type communications, which supports a large number of devices. So, I mean, in fact, there's so much density, it can cover about 10 million devices per square kilometer. And then there are sector-specific applications. And these are the broad categories. The sector-specific applications that 5G networks are the crucial backbone to are things like Internet of Things, which can be used for farming, which can be used for industrial automation, it can be used for supply chain management. Then there is media and entertainment, because we've seen a lot of boom over video consumption recently, and the quality of content has increased over time. We've moved from standard definition to high definition to now 4K resolutions. The kind of bandwidth and speed that 5G provides will enable providing extremely good quality content to mobile devices, without the need for Wi-Fi as we have currently. Then even something as important as telemedicine to provide healthcare in remote locations where you don't have the sort of infrastructure to support maybe surgery or to support even like a visit to the doctor. The sort of ultra low latency that 5G can provide can really enable telemedicine as well. Communications, we've gone from a time where we used to send telegraphs or we used to send Morse code messages to now doing video calling. 4G was really the technology that enabled video calling, and 5G will take it a step further, especially now that we're all working remotely. It'll be extremely critical to enabling remote work as well and connecting people across the world in real time. Gaming is something that has boomed a lot recently, and the newest trend really is processing all the gaming information over a cloud and then just delivering the final results to you over a mobile phone. Google recently launched Stadia. Even delivering bandwidth of that content will require that sort of bandwidth and that sort of low latency. 5G is really the technology that will now truly enable this. And finally, we can also talk about autonomous vehicles. They collect a lot of information. They have a lot of sensors. They're processing a lot of data in real time. Autonomous vehicles will require a separate network that enable them to communicate with each other. Again, 5G will be the sort of network that enables this sort of processing and this sort of speed that will enable these new technologies.
Thank you, Siddharth. In fact, I agree with Siddharth. There are a lot of applications, whether in terms of AR, VR, where I see applications in education, for example. With this 5G coming in and with the technology what you're talking about, there will be very different ways on education, on skilling, very different ways for doing lot of things with robotics like activity. In pandemic like this where you want to work from home, you can sit here and do online classroom as a in much more immersive way. So I think it's going to be exciting time as and when it comes. Also, I have heard that it will improve or it will give a fillip to on the edge network also technology, and that is something which considered to be the in thing now. A lot of focus is going there, and this 5G will help them especially get the data to and fro from edge to the server. With this, let us move to Farid. 5G is a classic bedrock or foundation for a lot of application, and there is no better application which we will see other than smart cities, where all this application actually converge, whether it is IoT, whether it is AI, whether it is robotics, all these things converge. Farid, you have been doing a lot of work on smart cities, and we really like to understand how this whole thing comes together and what is the impact of 5G in smart cities.
Thank you so much. I think being a Clint Eastwood fan myself, I'm going to stick more to the good side of it and try to give a more optimistic picture with a little bit in the end. So yes, smart cities, and I've moved on from that term. Actually, I would like to talk more about sustainable habitations, or not just cities. Although 5G at the moment, the biggest bottleneck is its cost, which would and the density that it requires, the population density it requires to become viable. But lots of very good and very exciting applications that we can think of, improvements, and then we can talk about over the horizon, where things that we haven't even thought of are possible because of not just the speed, but mainly because of the low latency that 5G offers. So coming from IEEE, let me start first with the energy, because energy was one thing that drove us in the 20th century and made great progress and helped us with the Industrial Revolution, having power, having electricity. 5G is a loose analogy for that, but I would move on to say, I think, Vaibhav, you mentioned that it's a bit like in the 2000s when we had the internet coming of age. And now this is 5G, which will give us smart energy, smart grids that'll know when to switch, where to switch, and save not just energy, but also deliver energy where it's required, which is, again, very key to keep 5G functioning. So they kind of assist each other. It's more of a symbiotic relationship. Smart lighting, for example. One of the things that is two of the factors, I think, on the planet at the moment, which humans need to really think about, is the pollution levels that we live in and the water we drink, the sweet water. Because I'm going to go out on a limb and make a claim that in the next 25 to 30 years, we will have surplus energy. So energy is no longer that barrier, or it seems to be, if we look a little bit way beyond from where we are, with all the solar and wind and renewable energies coming through, that we're going to have more energy than we need. And that itself will open new doors, which would, again, bring 5G to the fore. But smart lighting is one, smart traffic, for example. These are the obvious ones. So what we are doing with smart cities, we are taking the utilities, we are taking the public services, and we are enhancing, upgrading, interconnecting them. And when I say interconnecting, so you understand if, for example, on transport, on traffic, you can avoid. I mean, we all do that with Google Maps and Apple Maps these days that we know. Now, whole cities will be able to redirect traffic. You can find parking, even now it's available, that you can find parking on your mobile phone, so you don't drive around in really congested cities looking for parking. So those are the applications which are almost on the drawing board or are being tested out, which will become just commonplace, just routine. Transport, mobility, healthcare, telemedicine, they all come together in smart cities. Making smart cities smarter, more intuitive, and taking that concept a little bit further, I would say that sustainability is at the basis of everything. So how can we sustain what we have and improve upon it? That's a question I think that most people who are looking at the future are thinking about. And 5G, again, because of its low power and because it will have more devices connected to it and more feedback, that will help us in terms of having better air quality, saving water in water pipes. And I think, Mihir, you spoke about sensors. Sensors are going to be the big thing, because we look at sensors which will do stuff like telling us which patch of the road has a higher density of cracks, and the city can redirect and go there and send their people there to repair. Again, efficiency. So that's improvement on efficiency. Security. You can have more secure and better policing when you do that. And of course, someone did touch upon surveillance. Of course, 5G would increase that. So there's always a sting in the tail, isn't it? When you improve something, there are other things that will come up, and 5G is no different. So I think autonomous vehicles, Siddhartha, I think you touched upon that. AVs, you can have like 200 km/h vehicles running around, and because of low latency. So as I said, just increasing the speed as we did from 2G to 4G did not have that transformative effect that 5G is going to have, mainly because of the ultra reliable, low latency communication, as it's called, which would give rise to remote telesurgery, where you can have a brain operation being done in somewhere in remote Africa by a surgeon sitting in Johns Hopkins, or machinery in hazardous locations, like mines, for example, being operated over 5G. Yes, I'm not going to touch upon too much on the other stuff, but surveillance is going to be big, sensors is going to be big, and it has to be. And the things that we want to look at, where mainly the cities will get affected, will be transport, healthcare, and the drivers for transport, healthcare, education, all of these are trying to improve what we have. So rapid scaling of core services, and by core services, I mean services that cities or deliver to their citizens, getting more bespoke and targeted to the citizens. So with that, I'll probably end, and I have a lot to say, but I think that's quite enough as a snapshot. Vaibhav?
Thank you, Farid. No, I thank you for sharing your thoughts. We all talk about smart cities. India has kind of focused on 100 smart cities. Really, if you want to see it in action, to see the maximum benefit, maximum efficiency, it needs the infrastructure, and 5G is going to be one of the critical infrastructure which it requires. With this, let us come to Mihir. Mihir, can you tell on the strategic consideration which countries will need to take when you deploy 5G networks?
Sure, Vaibhav. The way I see it is that there are a lot of issues, and I think we are going to touch on that as we go along. The key consideration, which can be, behavioral, policy, regulatory, technological, strategic. Start with a big strategic issue. The biggest issue is the national security. The 5G is going to be the backbone of commercial and governmental critical applications. And Farid talked about, smart cities will be running all these sensors, monitoring highways, infrastructure. Then there will be 5G dealing with all kind of financial services system, payments, and all of those banking systems. As a matter of fact, 5G. Sorry, Nishith bhai?
Can you keep microphone closer to you so we can
Sure.
find it difficult?
Okay, sorry. Thank you. So 5G will be running will be the backbone for many mission critical governmental and commercial applications, infrastructure, also financial services, payment mechanisms, and all of that. A lot of defense-based applications will also run on 5G. Of course, they will be all protected under different kind of security protocols. Then law enforcement will also be running or using 5G. So 5G will be having a lot of this technology. Now, hardware and the software in 5G is complex. And in most cases, those hardware and software are created by companies which are foreign companies. Now, if foreign companies provide the hardware and software, which you cannot decipher, which you cannot make sense out of it, you are worried that there will be some kind of backdoor entry, especially if companies are connected with government. So the biggest national security issue that is underway right now is that will these countries or will these companies create a backdoor into our own system and compromise our national security as well as financial or economic security of the nation? And now there are also questions about can they also compromise our healthcare system? So all those issues, just like health risk, these are at the individual level. These are the issues at the national level, and those things are being considered. Vaibhav, you talked about two different kind of protocols. One is the traditional protocol, another is the open system protocol. But here also there is an issue within traditional protocol. You have US and Europe, which is where Qualcomm and Cisco and Nokia and Ericsson's are located. And then you have China, where Huawei and ZTE and others are located. So there's trade war going on, national security issues going on, much larger level on the political landscape. India is especially worried, and what India has done, and that worry is real. It recently issued severe restriction on investment from neighboring country or the one which India shares the land border. So which will also going to affect in this situation of installing 5G. Another aspect or strategic aspect in 5G installation is the infrastructure investment. 5G is going to require billions of dollars. At the global level, it will even exceed $1 trillion investments. As we talked earlier, you have to purchase frequency license in order to operate in those frequency from government, which will be in billions of dollars. And then you also have to install new 5G infrastructure with 5G technology, hardware, and then software and all of that stuff. So that is going to be a huge investment. Now, if you look at current situation, especially in India, in the telecom sector, it is totally down because of competitive war. It has debt ratios has gone up significantly. Some companies are now trying to sell equity, and we have seen in the news in order to reduce the debt level, to be ready to take on more debt in the future. At the same time, current economic situation, everywhere economy is considered going down. Ability to raise more fund or debt to install futuristic technology is going to be a challenge. Another challenge I see, especially for India, is that a large population of India lives in rural area. And when they are in rural area, especially for India, it's different rural area than in US. In US, you have rural areas, but still people are more consolidated into a village or small area. Versus in India, when you say rural area, people are living far apart on their own farms. So there are villages are not really small cities. They are more like people scattered across many different farms. And the coverage with 5G is very low. So to cover large part of Indian population, a lot of installations will have to take place. So infrastructure investment is going to be a big issue. One solution could be there, where government collects a lot of money from frequency allocation. What government can do, share that revenue with telco to create infrastructure in rural areas. I'm sure government is doing a lot of that, passing laws and things like that. But actual physical money. Also, India has set up a National Infrastructure Investment Fund. Those kind of specialized fund can be set up to install 5G across the nation. Another two aspects that I'll quickly touch on. One is the workforce availability. 5G is going to require new workforce. There will be a lot of installation will be required, maintenance will be required. So you will require people skilled in installation and maintenance of telecom equipment. There will be people who will be required to know about how do you create a flexible architecture with 5G when you have so many different devices and so many different kind of sensors connected to it. So the load is going to be constantly changing in different areas at different time of the day. So you need to have flexible architecture. So you need people to create that for the networks. You will also need to have people skilled in security and privacy aspects to come into picture. So workforce availability is going to be a huge issue. And that's where government, academic institution, and industry can come together and identify issues, create specialized curriculum to tackle this kind of requirements. And India has what they call IITs are big, but there's also another large scale infrastructure in academic sector, which is called ITI, which basically provides very low level hands-on skill to technicians. So we have to create curriculum at ITI on this kind of requirements. And the last one, which is very close to my heart, is environmental and social impact of this technology. Every new technology brings with its own environmental and social impact. 5G is expected to be more energy efficient in many ways. However, still, there are no studies, significant studies done on environmental impact. There are rules in issuing permission regarding environmental impact, but governments, many places, to speed up the 5G installation, they have relaxed those rules. And in my view, we shouldn't do it. And some courts have agreed with me, at least in my view, that they have overruled government relaxation. And societal impact, you know, every new technology, think about internet, how it has changed the world. Think about social media, how it has changed our society and our life. Same way 5G is going to have a huge societal impact. And that is something, a very important consideration for all of us to look into. So these are the some strategic issues.
Thank you, May. I really appreciate. In fact, what you said reminded me that already Airtel had done a kind of a trial with Huawei, and thereafter in 2018, and thereafter, because of security issues, they have announced that, look, we will start rethinking and try to repartner with someone else. So already those issues are playing in the minds of Indian government. Also, interestingly, you talked about a solution for funding on the rural areas. Just for the benefit of everyone, Indian government actually charges what they call USO, Universal Service Obligation, which is a portion of the license fees, which all the telco pays to the government. They put that into USO fund, which is used to go and fund those sectors or those geographies which are not profitable. And the government telcos actually go and build those. So those are already in place. So hopefully, you know, if 5G picks up and they get good, you know, traction, then we will see you know, USO being used for rural areas also. But with that, let me come to Farid. Farid, can you tell a little bit about technical considerations? And we are running a little short of time, so you know, I'll appreciate all the speakers to be brief and to the point. Thank you. Farid, you are on mute.
Been covered.
Okay. Perfect. We can hear you now. Yeah, we can hear.
Okay, so I would rather go from, you know, the basics of 5G technology, which we have already covered, to where things are or are going to be, and what are the bigger challenges in terms of that. And one of the primary challenges that I can think of is that we're heading into almost like a perfect storm with IoTs, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and then 5G coming together. These are very, very powerful technologies. And I was talking to my 18-year-old son yesterday, and he gave me a soundbite. He said, it's like the afterlife story. No one knows what it's going to be like, but it's definitely going to happen. So there's no way we can get the genie into the bottle. So what do we do with it? That, I think, is key, because setting down, even now, I was listening to a senior executive in Google who said that they are devising machine learning, which are now devising new forms of technology without human intervention. So, that is where things are going. And with this coming together with 5G, although it's not directly related to 5G, but 5G is going to be the platform where these technologies go. It's very essential that we understand where they go, what effect they're going to have, what are the positives and negatives going into the future. You did touch upon about the non-ionization part of it, which is true. Millimeter waves are within that spectrum, but it's not always, it's not 100% safe, because the visible spectrum, sunlight is also non-ionized, it gives skin cancer. So we are still on a stage where we don't understand where that is. So the good things, what's called the massive MIMO, the multiple input and output objects. Again, India has a unique position. We are way ahead in software technology than most other organizations. Oh, sorry, most other regions and countries. And there's absolutely no benefit in trying to chase that. Let us not go into that in trying to get the hardware right. Let's try to go into what is the big unknown at the moment for 5G technology. Is we often talk about the cloud, that everything will happen in the cloud, everything will be controlled by the cloud or in the cloud. However, there is very little in terms of understanding of how we will function with the density of devices, with the interoperability of devices, and the complexities that they will come with. How will the cloud, even writing software for that works with a very wide range of devices, sensors, drones, the security behind it, and especially security, because with 5G, we're also creating a single point of failure almost. So if someone or some rogue organization takes a 5G network down, a worst case scenario, for a city, virtually brings a city to a standstill, much worse than what COVID did. So, and lastly, I would say data corruption, fact of life. Anyone who's been in IT would know that. Databases corrupt. You can have Sigma 5s, Sigma 7s, but there's still the possibility of some data going rogue. Now, if that's fed into AI, then we will never know where it went and what effect it had. It could have a good or a bad effect. That, again, needs to be studied. So those are the areas. I'm not going into the various aspects of 5G. Yes, they start from, but I'll very briefly touch upon a few things like beamforming, for example, or the high band that would direct the signals to the recipient. So those are the kind of things that I think Siddhartha touched upon, the fact that with 5G, you can differentiate. So you can have like a network where, or a segment of the network, which is given to the police, the security, or autonomous vehicles, or so on. So you can have those gradations that were not possible so much with 2G, 3G, and even LTE. So in the interest of time, I will stop here, but I can perhaps leave it there. Telehealth was also one thing that we talked about. Again, big challenges and big opportunities there.
Thank you, Farid, and we appreciate your thoughts on this, and thank you for saying a lot of information in such a short time. With this, let me come to Siddhartha. Siddhartha, can you touch upon the legal policy and regulatory aspects specifically focus on what India is doing and some of the initiative India has taken. And say that you have like 3 minutes or 4 minutes max.
I'll just touch upon some like critical issues. So one thing that has come up quite frequently is security, privacy, and surveillance concerns on 5G networks. Um, this, one of the crucial parts of the regulatory framework is the unified license that the Department of Telecommunications issues to telecom service providers. And there's a interestingly, there's a specific prohibition currently within the unified license to not employ bulk encryption on their network. And Vaibhav, you mentioned edge computing. So interestingly, the way this could work in terms of encryption is that while telecom companies may not encrypt the entire network or all of the communications, maybe there's a possibility where the edge nodes may be encrypted, and you don't really need to encrypt the entire network to be able to comply with this requirement, unless of course the requirement changes in the future. Now, in terms of data protection and privacy, currently the framework that we have now under the Information Technology Act only focuses on sensitive personal data or information, which is health information, financial information, or biometric information. But the government is working on privacy issues. We know that there's a new bill that has been tabled in the parliament, is pending with the parliamentary committee, which will expand protections to a broader set of personal data. So there is some scope for better protection even as we go through 5G networks, transition to 5G networks. In terms of spectrum allocation in India is based on the National Frequency Allocation Plan, which itself is sort of based on the International Frequency Table, which is issued by the International Telecommunications Union. In India, there are a couple of Supreme Court judgments that require that spectrum licensing decisions be rational, transparent, and free from any sort of arbitrariness. And there have been recent cases where the Supreme Court has said that going forward, spectrum can only be allocated based on a public auction. There was initially a first come, first serve policy that the Supreme Court has struck down and said you can only do it based on public auctions. Now, in order to ensure that you have optimal 5G networks, you need adequate spectrum. What the government has actually been working on this. In 2017, it had constituted a high-level forum for 5G, which recognized two crucial issues in 5G in spectrum allocation. One is the limited license spectrum that is available in India. And the second issue it identifies is the cost of spectrum, which is relative to per capita GDP is quite high in India. So it made certain recommendations, and we will see where this goes. An auction was planned for some time around now, but it has been deferred to like mid-2020. But what has been identified is 3 different tiers of spectrum. One is the announced tier, where they've recommended certain bands to be allocated for 5G networks already. And then there's the identified tier, where certain bands are recommended for designated use for certain applications. And finally, there's the study tier, where certain frequencies will be studied to see if they can be used for 5G deployment or not. Apart from this, TRAI had also constituted a white paper. TRAI had released a white paper where they discussed some of the issues in terms of what will really be required. Certain licensing conditions probably need to be changed in order to make sure that we're using 5G networks optimally. The government of India is also trying to provide an impetus to create new 5G technologies domestically. So they have launched a hackathon, which is currently underway to see what companies can come up with to leverage 5G technologies for medicine, for infrastructure, for mobility, etc. And finally, in 30 seconds, Mihir had touched upon like location of 5G equipment. There'll be a lot of different small cells or network towers that will be required to make sure that we have a good 5G network. In terms of public spaces, there's the right-of-way rules under the Indian Telegraph Act, which allow companies to apply to public authorities to use their infrastructure or use their immovable property to set up telegraph equipment. In terms of private buildings, because small cells will need to be set up, most likely it seems like telecom companies will have to negotiate individually with societies and buildings to set up towers on top of their, to make sure there's better connectivity.
Thank you, Siddharth, and thank you for adhering to the time limit. We have tried to take questions during our discussion itself. There are two questions which we have it, which I will quickly address. First question is by Tanveer. His question is, considering that many of the Indian telecom companies are already struggling, will they be able to implement 5G? I think the answer really is that not immediately, but definitely they have to do it at some point in time, and they don't have a choice. Just imagine a situation where government does auction and there are companies who takes it up, whether it's Reliance Jio or some new company which come and take it up, and they started providing, and everybody then says, okay, I really like the 5G, I want to go and use 5G. They go over the inflection point, then everybody who is using 4G, we have no choice but to come to 5G. And since there is a rollout time to actually deploy, those decisions will need to be made much more in advance. So I don't think people have a choice. If there is an auction, even though people who are struggling will have to find a way to get into the bandwagon. There's a FOMO here. Second question which was asked is by Dinesh. His question is, why does 5G network being concentrated only in mobile device? Why not static device like Wi-Fi? I think technically it can, but the whole objective is that it's likely to replace Wi-Fi. I mean, that's one of the implications of it, because you really, consider 5G is more like your Wi-Fi device, router, which is there, across on a public space, right? So that's what it is. So it's not beneficial to use only for static devices. There's no particular value. It's more beneficial in mobile device, but technically it can. I think with this, I would like to invite Nishith Bhai. I know we are running out of time. We have about a minute to two left. Nishith Bhai, do you want to say some last words?
Very much, first of all, Farid, for joining our team of experts. And as you can see that we are working quite hard on seeing that if 5G has a lot of benefits, but our attention is also on looking at the problems that it brings along with that. Today, I do not know what is the time horizon we are looking at, next 3 years, 5 years, whatever, but we have some time, at least I would say 1,000 days. And within that, we should be looking at what kind of regulations we need to, because this is going to increase. On the one side, all the benefits are there. If the cars are going to be, connected with 5G, automated cars are more safe than the, the human-driven cars. And there will be a lot of benefits to that, but keeping aside benefit for a while, I think the concerns of the people and the regulators is that what are the negatives, and that is where the regulatory framework generally comes into play. So as I see, one is the radiation side. A lot more needs to be communicated, whether it's that simplicity or not. Number two, privacy. Third, security. We talk about national interest. I think time has come to look at global interest.
Global interest, yes.
We need to look at global security now, because everything is becoming global, irrespective of the fact that something is not going right at this point in time. But we have to see that, as I say, India spends $60 billion on defense every year, 15 billion on education, and 10 billion on healthcare, as I understand from the numbers. Now, I think if we can put together something in the world that global security improves, but other thing is that security and also the privacy issue. Now, there is also sometimes more centralization of powers in the governments. I think that is also a matter of concern for the public, because who can use the how can be, what will be the situation, and thing here. Just I would say that we are going to be discussing some of these issues. How can we create a new world with decentralized governance? And on May 14th, May 18th, May 20th, and maybe we are going to have a series of discussion on Parliament in the cloud, new reinventing democracy, and how should the powers go back to the people, and also strike a balance so that we can organize in a manner that which is most beneficial to people. Because it is one thing to have the data, privacy and all those regulations, but that goes into the hands of the wrong person, I think it can create a fog. So we are going to be having that discussion along with Team Ripper of and other thought leaders from Sweden and Spain and other countries. So we got a small series of discussion on the new governance. So we need to have simultaneously some work going on governance, but all these issues, as I said, radiation, privacy, security, and stuff like that, we should start working on them so we can, if not completely eliminate, reduce the negativity. Otherwise, this will become a showstopper. We don't know at what point of time how it will turn out. So it's very important that we have some time still, 3 years or 4 years, whatever, to put in place a framework, and it is not impossible. I would close with those words, but once again, Farid, thank you for joining from London, Vaibhav from New York, here from Silicon Valley, and Siddhartha from Silicon Valley, our offices. I'm so happy that we had the chance to start this discussion today so we can take it forward in the coming weeks. Thank you so much.